So what have been your thoughts?
My thoughts are Lori is doing uh, candidly a better job than I thought. I mean, she is probably going to go down in history as an example of why you're not your own lawyer. But she has done a good job. She's answered questions, she's handled things in a way to try to hit the point she wants to hit. Uh, but, sadly, she's missed many opportunities to object. Uh, she has made it all about Lori and all about how people have done her wrong, which, we all expected. Trina K's doing it by the book. She is following all the rules. She is being very conservative in what she puts in. She is not pushing the envelope, and the judge is being very patient. This is for the public who are interested. This is typical on a case where someone decides to go pro se, represent themselves. Traditionally, the judge and the prosecutor become much more conservative, much more careful in how they handle things when they have somebody who's representing themselves.
Okay, so you bring up some really good points. Why do you think they're being so conservative? And there have been those moments where I'm like, oh, I wonder if Trina K is gonna make this point. Like it almost feels like there's a setup and she could spike, and she doesn't. She holds back.
When a prosecutor is going against somebody who is representing themselves on a very serious case, it is the opposite of what a lot of people think. You don't take advantage of it. An ethical prosecutor really doubles down and becomes absolutely very careful about what they do, what they say, how far they push things. It's one thing when you have an opposing counsel and then they can raise an objection and the court can rule because then your record's clean and safe and you followed the rules. But when you have somebody on the other side who doesn't know the rules or thinks they know the rules, but really doesn't, you have to be super, super careful both to protect your case and candidly to protect your rights, because that's a prosecutor's oath, is not only to get a conviction, but to do what's right, even if sometimes that's not popular.
Looking at those opening statements, what were your thoughts about Trina K starting? I mean, this is a conversation that you had in Idaho. How do you start? How do you lay the groundwork for this really complex case? Here in Arizona, it does feel like it's a little bit more geared towards Charles. So we're focusing a little bit, zooming in more on that aspect. But still, what did you think of her starting with those text messages between Alex and Lori?
Trina starting with those text messages very clearly started the jury thinking about this as a conspiracy. It is Lori giving direction or even making request to the her brother saying, I need you close to me. It's going to go down this week. That is starting her case with conspiracy. So on this case, we're going to see a different trial than we saw in Idaho. It's pared down. It's very narrowly focused on Charles, going to be very narrowly focused on what happened in to Charles Vallow and the conspiracy and the facts and circumstances around his death. To the extent we hear much about what happened in Idaho, it's all going to be through the lens of how does it help the jury decide what happened to Charles Vallow. So we are going to see from Trina K a very different, very pared down, very Arizona focused case. And that's what we've seen this week and we saw in opening. As for Lori's opening is almost like a mock trial I would coach in high school. There is an old school thought that you have to use the phrase, the evidence will show. That is a phrase that people, newer attorneys use, mock trial participants use to sort of show they're playing by the rules and they aren't arguing their case. So it's people think that's what you have to say. They're wrong. Trina K's opening showed us that. So Lori has clearly gotten some coaching from someone who, or she thinks it herself, that you have to follow this script of the evidence will show, and she's just wrong. but the content of her opening made it very clear that she's going to claim that Alex was either defending her or defending Tylee, that he was acting in lawful self-defense, and that there was no grand conspiracy to get Charles. So I would grade it like I would grade a mock trial case. You know, she's like a mock trial participant doing her first opening, but she got home the points she wanted them to think about.
Well, and so Trina K, right, makes this, her case seems to be she wanted life insurance money, $1 million, and she wanted to be with her paramour, Chad Daybell. And Lori seems to make it, all of these horrible things happen. The evidence will show I bought flip-flops with Tylee. The evidence will show I went to Burger King. The evidence will show this was my fourth marriage. But the evidence will show I was having an affair. The evidence will show, there's no mention. I don't think she ever mentions Chad Daybell in her opening statements. And she makes this about so she addresses the $1 million and she focuses in on that and the Social Security, but there's no mention of Chad Daybell. And I guess anyone would do that, right? Any defense is going to focus on what they want to say, or what they want the jury to think.
Absolutely. In Lori's opening, she is very focused on trying to create a facts and circumstances that they led a normal life, that she and Alex weren't conspiring to kill anybody. And in order to convince the jury of that, she has to downplay her relationship and ongoing affair with Chad Daybell. She is working hard to normalize their relationship so that the jury questions whether was there this conspiracy. So my husband, my house, you hear her talking about my children, you hear her working on issues to convince the jury, to normalize what was going on and to make this a simple self-defense case or defense of others case.
And that you bring up a really good point. She says a lot of my children, my house, my carpet, my floor, my tile, right? Like she gets that specific. And then she, her brother comes on the stand and you would think like she would say, hey, brother. She's like, hello, Mr. Cox. Like she clearly is upset with him. There's at least that's how I was kind of tempted to read it. Is that where she very much personalizes certain things and then other things draws a distance? Is that going to affect also how the jury interprets her behavior and what she does? Like, yeah, I guess that's my question is, could that potentially impact them for the better or for the worse in how they perceive her?
Lori's actions throughout this trial have created two different situations. One, she's her own worst enemy because she is showing everyone she's clearly smart. She clearly can turn things on and off. She is calculated in her approach to everyone, and she has a plan for everything she says. So in that respect, the jury's going to see her not as this meek, mild, demure, I couldn't hurt anybody person. They're going to see her as somebody who's large and in charge, right? They're going to see her as somebody who's completely capable of planning whatever she needs to plan. So that hurts her in that respect. It's also going to hurt her if she later in Idaho attempts to turn around and say, hey, I really was crazy, or I really was incompetent. Because the Lori we're seeing now in the courtroom was the Lori on the jail phone calls throughout a lot of her calls in Idaho. Yeah, she talked about things that were religious beliefs that were extreme, and some would say bizarre, but you could characterize almost any religion's beliefs in miracles that way, right? So Lori has consistently shown a high degree of intelligence, a high degree of competence. So her changing and turning demeanors, depending on who's on the stand, shows how calculated she is. So I think it's going to hurt her with the jury. She is going through a situation where she is showing them she's completely capable of planning and pulling off a conspiracy.
I'm thinking about these witnesses, that have been on the stand, very different way that even the way that she'll interact with a judge. I keep thinking of what you mentioned in our first interview. You will see her behave differently towards men versus women. And you see that, I think I see that with the way she interacts with the judge. But you also see, this moment yesterday, and it really stood out to me in stark contrast with her behavior towards Nancy Jo, the woman that went on a date with Charles, or her friends. Well, she didn't even want to interview Christina Applegate, but Serena Sharp, very combative, very argumentative. And then you see her demeanor towards Kay. What did you think of that?
In terms of Lori's actions with Serena, she had labeled Serena dark before Serena walked away from her because Serena was questioning. So Lori went into this believing that Serena was against her, went into this knowing that Serena had information that could hurt her, and that Serena's narrative would undermine the picture she's trying to paint is that Alex was acting in self-defense, that this wasn't a long discussed plan. So her attack on Serena was calculated, designed to shake Serena. I also think she couldn't help herself. Serena did not want to be involved in any of this. She was sucked in. She had no choice but to participate. She was subpoenaed. But once she was up there, she told the truth. Lori and her efforts to cast out were really, really part of the castings, and the cast outs were part of their planning. They're part of their effort to show people that the only way to quote unquote save some of these people is to kill the body so that the demon will be released and the soul can move on. So I think, and when Serena didn't buy into that, she became public enemy number whatever Lori's list was.
Well, and see, that's interesting. I can see what you're saying with that. And obviously you have so much more background because you went through so much of this evidence. But why did we not see her do that with Christina? Christina talked about the crushed pills, in the drink that, JJ's crushed pills in Charles's drinks. And we didn't see her question her.
And so it depends on Lori's analysis on whether the person is truly out to get her. Serena, let me start over again. Lori's approach to Christina would be different because Christina was never labeled as dark. She was never labeled as somebody who was overtly out and questioning what Chad and Lori did. And so she walked away, but she didn't create doubt in others like Serena did. Serena questioned things. Serena had the audacity to question Lori and Chad. So I think it stems from sort of how those relationships are different, how people's relationship with Lori evolved over time. And I think she made choices based on her emotional reaction, which is not unusual.
Well, and I think I called her Christina Applegate, Christina
You did,
Atwood.
I did not say that. Yeah.
I apologize. But I mean, Christina Atwood, is she the one that said to her, or was that Serena that said, I think it was Atwood, where Alex Cox made the comment about wanting to kill Charles. And Christina went to Lori and said, hey, if this happens, I'm going to have to call the police. Like it was just so uncomfortable for her.
Yeah, it was uncomfortable, but that is not something that I don't think Lori saw the personal attack in Christina that she saw in Serena. And so she approached people very differently based on emotions, based on how deeply she thought they hurt her. And, let's face it, these people are not sticking to the narrative. And so she's going to go off of what she thinks will get them to respond to her in the way she wants done.
And I mean, I guess to a certain extent, I wonder if she wants a sense of vindication or confrontation with them. right? It maybe strategically she wants to question them, but she also wants to have the power to be able to have them in front of her and be able to ask these questions, or be able to let them know that at least for now, you're answering to me.
I think that's a good observation. Lori likes to be in charge. That is primarily and probably the biggest driver behind why she's representing herself. Her lawyers in Idaho did an excellent job with what they had. Um, the lawyers in Arizona, I'm confident, would have done the same. But Lori, in her mind, has what she wants done. And in this instance, Lori will always shape her questions, her actions based on what Lori wants to accomplish, what Lori thinks is best, and what works for Lori, even if it's against the advice of people. So her questions are very much, I'm in charge, I'm on stage, I'm the one acting, in control here. And this is a kind of a last hurrah for her. She's got this trial, she's got Brandon's trial if it goes, and then she's not going to have her say publicly in the courtroom before, and public attention is going to move on. And Lori knows that.
That's a really good point. She did that second interview. And what was interesting to me was at the end of it, she said, we'll have that conversation later, right? So it almost felt like she's planning on continuing to give these interviews. Will there be a public appetite for them if she's not actually answering the questions, if she's dictating what kinds of questions she'll speak to? I think will be telling.
I think at some point the public is going to get sick of Lori's persona now, and they will move on, especially if she doesn't answer questions, doesn't answer what actually happened to Tylee. Were you there? Right? If she doesn't address some of the questions that people had, and doesn't become more forthcoming, people are going to get sick of the, I'll tell you later, or we'll see, or the demeanor she had with Keith Morrison.
Do you think that it will matter at this point if she takes a stand, because she's getting, in the way that my industry talks about it, she's getting so much airtime because she's up there questioning everyone, cross-examining. Will it matter to the jury if she takes a stand, if they already feel like they have a gauge of her character by the end of this?
I think it'll absolutely matter if Lori takes the stand. And I could be very wrong. I really don't think Lori's going to take the stand, because her taking the stand puts Trina K in charge. And she's not going to want Trina K to be able to answer her questions, because Trina K is a longtime experienced prosecutor in one of the most experienced homicide offices in the country. Trina will not go with the "I'll tell you later" or the roundabout answers that she can give a journalist. She's going to have to answer questions. And her failure to answer those questions will hurt her greatly. And then if she's up there and takes a stand, the jury gets to ask her questions, right? And she's not going to want that to have other people in charge of her narrative. We'll see. You could come back and say, Rachel, you were wrong. And but I really would be shocked if Lori Vallow testifies, because she doesn't want to have anyone else in charge. You will see her do a more detailed closing argument rather than testify, I think.
That's really interesting. And yeah, I guess we'll find out. We'll all end up seeing how this all plays out. And it just kind of what you mentioned about Trina K. She is very calculating. She's very careful because of everything that's at stake with this case.
You're right. One can see in Trina K's behavior a very experienced prosecutor. Her judgment calls on when to go forward, when to follow up. She is pulling her punches. There's some things that she could have asked that she didn't. And it's because they were things that a defense attorney might have objected to, but Lori clearly didn't know to do it. There was an issue at the end of one of the Nancy Jo Hancock's that was right before break, where Trina asked some follow-up questions in rebuttal, and the judge, Lori didn't object. Some of that stuff a defense attorney would have objected to, and they were very measured. She didn't go too far. And the judge himself said, Ms. Vallow, I'm going to let you follow up on that because maybe some of that stuff I should have not let happen. If you want to follow up, you can. And Lori chose not to. And Trina didn't go any further. So when a prosecutor is experienced, you will absolutely see judgment calls. You will see people be like, why didn't they go there? Well, it's not because they didn't think about it. They didn't go there because they didn't want to open the door. They didn't want to risk their conviction, and they wanted to play it fair. And I think that's what we're seeing out of Trina K and the team in Maricopa. They're being very careful. They're being very measured. They're being very thoughtful. Their opening statement was a very conservative, very traditional opening statement. It was only clear-cut evidence she's going to get in. There were very few reasonable inferences, which you're allowed to do. There was very minimal discussion of crimes outside of Arizona. And that is a very conservative, very safe opening, clean opening statement. And so that is just the way she's doing this. And I think we'll see more of the same. What I did find was very interesting was that when one of the times I saw her, Trina K, get assertive and object a lot more was when Lori was going after Nancy Jo Hancock, which, harassment, she objected more, even if the answers weren't going to really hurt her. She was protecting her witness, which one of the things prosecutors absolutely have to do is when a witness, especially somebody like Nancy Jo Hancock, who never in her world would have wanted to have to testify in a murder trial, right? But she's doing it because it's the right thing to do. She came forward because she thought she had information, which is what we want everyone to do. And so a prosecutor has to take the steps, not because you're afraid of the answer, but to protect those people so that people are not afraid of coming forward. And that's one of the times I saw Trina kind of get spicier, which is when she was going after people unfairly, when Lori was going after people unfairly. That's when Trina K got spicy.
Yeah, that exchange with Nancy Jo. I mean, that was, what is it, that quote that none of us can forget? Don't flatter yourself, right? That response to, you spent the whole time talking about me. And Nancy Jo, and then when Lori was asking, well, what was a lot of things, right? Because Nancy Jo said, well, we talked about a lot of things. And I could tell that Nancy Jo was also like, do you really want me to see it? She's like, I mean, do you want the narrative? Because I'll give it to you. I just don't know if it's okay. And you see them do that sidebar, and you see Lori push to be able to ask that question. And I think after lunch, she maybe someone told her, hey, that might not be in your best interest,
That was a very interesting situation with Nancy Jo and Lori. I walked away with, again, her own worst enemy. She's representing herself because she opened the door on several things. Now, Trina K chose not to go too far into it, which is completely appropriate, and keeps a nice, clean appellate record. But there are things that could have come out about Charles's fears for his own safety, Charles's fears for the kids, Charles's belief that she was conspiring with Chad to have an affair and to get rid of their spouses. I mean, Charles made statements to several people which don't come in because it's hearsay. And so the minute Lori started opening the door about what Charles told this lady, she opens the door to the rest of it to come in as part of the whole context. And that's why the judge cautioned her. So clearly somebody over at the lunch break said, "Hey, let's get this person off the stand. She can only hurt you." And by the way, questioning her for dating men who are already married doesn't help you. I literally was sitting there saying, "Hypocrite, hypocrite," to my computer screen because Charles wasn't planning her death. Charles wasn't trying to figure out how to get her death to finance his new life with his new girlfriend, right? Charles wasn't doing any of that. He was trying to move on with women from the LDS faith, right? So it's a interesting situation to see Lori Vallow act affronted at someone dating a married man.
I mean, yeah, there were, I feel like we could talk about that exchange for about an hour because there was just so much to unpack there.
Yeah.
And yes, I was having the same thoughts and I was curious. I was like, why isn't Trina asking these questions? Like what Charles, he was fearful for his life. She kind of let Adam go there. She kind of let Kay
Mhm.
go there, but she didn't go deep. And we all know that there's so much deepness that you can dig up there. Okay, so as we, try to get you, respect your time, I am curious to know what you think about the fact that we've lost two jurors in week one. We have only two alternates, and this could be anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks, I think. Um, are you concerned?
I will tell you, I'm a little concerned that you're down to two alternates. Hopefully everybody stays healthy. Hopefully there aren't any natural disasters, right? And so I think that I would be concerned. I did wonder why they had four alternates for a case. I would have, we pushed for more. Judge Boyce absolutely gave us more. We didn't need to run through them all, thank goodness. But yes, I think the loss of a couple alternates would have me as a prosecutor worried, and I would be really bringing it to the court's attention. Maybe at some point you're going to need to sequester. So if they lose another one, there's going to be some conversations in chambers, I'm sure.
And last question that I have for you is, what was a moment that you thought, okay, this is really going to help the prosecution's case? And was there a moment that you thought this is really going to help the defense's case?
I think for me, it centers on the Nancy Joe's testimony in terms of this helps the prosecution case. That showed Lori, even though Lori didn't mean to, Lori's cross-examination of Nancy Joe helped the prosecution. Her level of treatment of the lady, her attitude and her actions, and her calculated way, Nancy Joe, her calculated way of approaching Charles's death is a high contrast. You have somebody who went on one date with the man who chokes up, and Lori hasn't choked up ever about Charles's death. The jury will see that. The jury has seen that. And they are absolutely watching everything that Lori does, whether Lori's talking or not. They're sitting back and saying, is this woman capable of planning their husband's or, existing husband, soon to be ex-husband's death? And her actions and her demeanor and her questions say absolutely. There are some times during some of the detective testimony in terms of length of time, some of the questions she asked of Coons in particular, I thought laid a good foundation for maybe chipping away at how long Charles was laying there, chipping away for some of the forensic evidence. I thought she did a good job. I think some of the answers of some of the officers weren't as clear and concise as they could have been, but candidly, nothing is going to outweigh the evidence that this woman is capable and did plan to kill her husband.